Hi, this is Carl Franklin. You're watching DNR TV from DNRTV.com. I'm in Oslo, Norway with Udi Dahan at 6 in the morning. Hi, Udi.
Hi, Carl. Good morning.
Good morning. We are here at the Norwegian Developers Conference, or NDC, and we were in the fishbowl talking yesterday and said, hey, this would be a good opportunity to do a DNR TV on the service bus. So tell us what we're looking at here on this webpage.
So this is the NServiceBus.com website, and it's where you go get NServiceBus. And while I'm telling you about it, I might as well click the download version 2.5 now button. So we're getting it going. By the way, we're doing this on Carl's machine. So there's the whole end user license agreement, so that you don't sue me if this causes all sorts of data loss or all sorts of problems. But later on, we'll see that actually it's really, really quite solid. So you don't need to worry about that. And
this is all, we're going to use Visual Studio 2010.
Absolutely. So here we go. We're just going to pick some place to put it. So Carl's going to tell me where not to put it.
The C drive is fine.
Okay, we'll stick it on the C drive under an NServiceBus folder.
Sure.
And this is the free community version. We'll talk a little bit later about that kind of stuff.
All right, and while this is downloading, we'll just zoom ahead through the magic of video editing to the end. All right, so we're almost done downloading here. Now, NServiceBus is a product that you developed mostly yourself?
Yeah, so I started writing NServiceBus, it must have been 7 or 8 years ago when the code base originally started. And as a consultant working on big enterprise type projects, I found the need to have this kind of toolkit with me. And originally I was waiting for Microsoft to kind of provide it. But client said, we need these projects done. So I started rolling my own thing and went into production. And then I took those libraries and took them to another client and kind of grew from there till it kind of became a thing in its own right.
Okay. And just tell us briefly while you're finding this file and unzipping it, tell us briefly what the big picture for having a service bus is. What problem does it solve?
So the big problem of NServiceBus, there are kind of two major things that NServiceBus solves. One of them is reliability, as we'll see in just a second. And the second one is publish-subscribe capability. So reliability, we'll see why that's important. I think at a fundamental level, we all understand kind of the reason why we want our software to be reliable and the underlying infrastructure to be reliable. But from a publish-subscribe perspective, sometimes people don't get what's the big thing about publish-subscribe. So kind of try to imagine writing code, like regular single process code without having .NET events.
Yeah.
And imagine how far back that would take you if you did not have a decent callback mechanism.
Right.
And ultimately, NServiceBus is giving you that kind of ability to decouple your code, but only at a distributed system, at a larger level, rather than just only at a single process level.
Okay.
So now we've found our download. One of the things that it'll tell you on the download page, so you'll see it right over here. Step number 1, security and configuration. Unblock the file.
That is such an important thing.
So a lot of times people forget this and they got all sorts of weird things that happen to them. So please remember.
And if you don't do it on the zip, you have to do it on every file.
Every file, and believe me, and NServiceBus has a lot of files.
Yeah.
So it comes with lots of binaries itself, as we'll see when we unzip this thing. And we've got .NET 3.5 code, and we've got .NET 4.0 code, and we've got tools, and we've got samples, and we've got all this kind of stuff. Believe me, you don't want to extract this kind of stuff yourself. So we're just going to pull this out over here. And
752 times you would have to unblock.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
So believe me, we've done a lot in terms of the documentation. So
that's good.
When you're going to the download, we have this, getting started page. Do go through those steps. It'll tell you what to do and the samples that we're going to be going through in just a second.
Yeah.
So take the time to work through the docs.
RTF webpage.
Yeah. So I think that's a thing that a lot of that a lot of open source projects sometimes, that's one of the barriers to entry, is the fact that they don't have very good documentation online, and it's kind of hard to get started. So we've invested a lot in the online documentation and the really, holding your hand, because NServiceBus is a little bit different from your regular kind of development. So
what's run me first bat?
Run me first. That's one of the reasons why we call it run me first.bat. So we're just going to open up a quick command prompt so that we can see what's going on. Oh, there it is, the beautiful green screen.
I love the green screen, yeah.
Right. So let's just back out to the CD NServiceBus, and we'll see the run me first.bat. And first thing we're going to do is just run it. And one of the things that you're seeing popping up right in front of you, MSMQ is not configured correctly. Please run with a /i to reconfigure MSMQ.
Okay. And
we can also see in Visual Studio, for those of you that are used to looking at it from Visual Studio, you can go to Server Explorer, and under the message queues, if MSMQ is not installed, it'll tell you right over there that there's a problem. Now, if you've used the netMSMQ binding with WCF, you might have run into this problem, but then it's kind of, you're on your own. How do I install MSMQ? And it has these 4 checkboxes, and which ones do I click? And what do they mean? And what is Active Directory integration? And all these kinds of things that I think is absolutely crazy. That a person that all they want to do is kind of get around to building their line of business app and have it just work. So we've done all that kind of stuff for you and said, just give it the /i. And it's going to go along and see, MSMQ is not installed. Let's go with install MSMQ. And now it's waiting to finish that up. Once it does that, it'll go do the next thing.
Where is it pulling MSMQ from? Does it exist on your hard drive but just not installed, or?
So the great thing about MSMQ and why we default to it as our transport, but it's pluggable, you can use anything else, is that MSMQ exists in every installed version of Windows. From Windows 2000 and on.
It's just not installed.
It's just not installed by default. So that makes it very easy for, if you want to roll out NServiceBus and your IT admins are saying, I don't know, I don't like MSMQ. It doesn't have an automated install. And, by default, it doesn't. We've just gone through the effort of going through the wizard and creating all the kind of stuff to give you an automated install.
Great.
The same thing with the distributed transaction coordinator. You'll see the DTC bit over there. And it checks that the DTC is there and all this kind of stuff that WCF doesn't do for you and you got to solve on your own. MSMQ sets all that stuff up, and as a final step, it also sets up some performance counters. And I don't know if we'll get to that today, but it really makes it easy to get started.
Great.
So right now we're all set and ready to go with our run me first stuff, and now we can refresh this, and now we'll see that, hopefully, that the message queues are now there.
Yes.
And here we have a bunch of queues. Now, NServiceBus uses private queues by default, and right now we don't have any, which is to be expected. So let's just go back to one of our samples. So we'll open up in the .NET 4.0 samples directory. We're going to grab our full duplex sample. So although we can do publish subscribe, we're going to start with the basic stuff here with request response.
Okay.
And what we have here, we've got a client process over here talking to a server process down here using the messages defined over here. We also have some unit tests, but we're not going to delve into that right now.
All right, great.
And one of the things that we're going to be doing is we're just going to press F5 and let it run. Okay. So right here we see that both of the processes are starting up.
Command line processes.
Right. So we're going to talk in just a second what it is that these regular console applications you're seeing over here. Notice this yellow stuff that's popping up. It's saying, the queue, my server input queue, does not exist.
Okay.
Now, you've probably had this kind of thing for if you've used WCF over MSMQ, that you've given it a queue and it says, the queue does not exist, and then it dies.
Yeah.
And then you're saying, okay, great. How do I go and create a queue?
So it does that for you?
It does it for you. One of the reasons that it does it for you, and we'll pull up the Server Explorer again over here. Now we'll go back to our private queues. refresh those and see, oh yeah, it's actually created a bunch of queues for us. The most important thing is that when you're going to create a queue, and you can see it over here, it's going to ask you this question: should I make the queue transactional or not? Now, the thing is, most developers kind of look at this and say, I don't know.
Right.
And
I wasn't planning on using any transactions.
I wasn't planning on using should I or shouldn't I?
Right.
And if I make this queue transactional, do I need to make that other queue transactional?
Right.
All these kinds of questions that get in the way of getting started. So NServiceBus by default makes queues transactional, and that's for other architectural reasons that we're going to get
plumbing.
to.
It needs those queues, so it makes them.
That's
you
right.
shouldn't have to do that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So all sorts of things that are just a little bit more manual when you're doing it with WCF, we've packaged all that up and made it just work out of the box. Now, so we see a queue for each one of our processes over here. So we see our client input queue, which is for our client process, a server input queue, which is for the server process, and also we have an error queue, and we're going to see that fellow in just a second.
Great.
So right now we're just going to go back and look at our processes, and we're going to see them talking to each other. So we have our client process on the top and our server process on the bottom. And we're just going to make a little bit of room on the screen so we can see them both happening.
Okay.
And it's telling you over here, send a message to the server. And if you want to exit, press Control-C. So we're going to send a whole bunch of messages, and we're seeing this request response happening, requesting to get data by this ID. And then you got a response back with some information. And we can send a whole bunch of messages.
It's my node, and I like it.
That's right. That's right. This is one of the things to show the use of appropriate XML serialization, that you can, that it does the whole XML encoding of strings that they themselves are XML. So it has all that stuff happening.
Great.
Now we're going to do one of the things that differentiates NServiceBus and MSMQ-based communication from your standard HTTP-based communication that a lot of people are used to. We're actually going to kill the server process.
Okay.
And we're going to have the client continue sending a whole bunch of messages. And
that's because we have a queue.
That's right. That's the great thing, that you don't need to have all your processes running all the time in order for things to work. Right. So imagine that this is your front-end web application that is collecting orders. You know, people are buying stuff on the site. And your back-end process, for whatever reason, IS recycled the application pool, somebody installed a critical Windows patch, whatever it is. We know that stuff goes down. And then later on, it comes back up again. So we're going to go back to our server process and bring it back online. And there it is, making, again, some room for things. And now we're going to see is that all the messages are delivered and all the responses are coming back to the client, and it just processes them the same way as before.
That's great.
And from a coding perspective, and this is kind of the big thing about it, you don't have to do anything to get this kind of behavior. It just works out of the box.
Well, let's take a look and see what you do have to do.
What do you actually have to do? So let's go back to our Visual Studio code over here. And sorry, that was a Shift F5 when it should have been just a stop debugging. I think I did Control Shift F5. So on the client side, we're going to look at the code that actually sends a message.
Okay.
And it's not going to be very complicated, as you'd expect. Sending a message is using the bus object to send a given message type, as we can see over here.
Okay.
And passing in a lambda that allows you to fill it in with a whole bunch of information.
Great.
Now, in order to do the handling of responses, you can register a callback that says, when I get a response, here is what I want to do. But you don't necessarily have to register a callback to have this happen.
Right.
That's really
simple.
That's what you're doing. So it looks very similar to your standard, web service request response code. It's just not on the next line of code exactly in handling the response. It's done via callback, so it's not a big deal.
Right.
Now, just to make sure, the Rocky and Bullwinkle thing, nothing up my sleeve kind of thing. We're going to go through the rest of the things that are over here.
Okay.
We have the endpoint configuration class. So this is the thing that tells NServiceBus what we want this endpoint to be like.
And does this come in the project template, or is this something you have to write?
So we've got a new set of project templates that aren't part of this download, but in the next download that they're going to be there. If you're using NuGet, you can also get the project templates for it as well. But for now, before we get into the tooling, just want to show what it is at a code level itself. Okay. So on the client side, you're saying, I want to configure this endpoint as a client. That's it. And ultimately, this tells NServiceBus to set up all its stuff for a client-side process. And finally, you have another class over here, the message handler, that's saying, when I get a response message handler, I'm going to write something out to the console.
Yeah.
Now, there's a little bit over here of preventing the publish-subscribe stuff from happening because I want this sample to be really simple. But all that we're doing here is to neutralize the publish-subscribe behavior so we can focus on request-response. Final thing is just the app config. There are two main pieces to it. There is the configuration of the MSM transport. Mm-hmm. It says, what's the name of my queue?
Yep.
And you have a bunch of other things here, like the error queue. We're going to get to the error queue in just a second. How many worker threads I have, how many maximum retries. Mm-hmm. So maximum retries and error queues we're going to talk about in a second. Okay. And the final thing is, where do I actually need to send my messages to? Because we didn't indicate that in code. We said, I'm going to go send a message. Ultimately, an administrator who's going to be deploying this system said, I'm going to put this client process on this IS box. I'm going to put that server process on that box over there. I'm going to call this queue this and that queue that. So you keep all this stuff out of the developer's hair. Okay. And they just focus on setting this up. This is all you're doing on the client process to get it going. Great. Really not that complicated.
Yeah, it's very simple.
Now we're going to look at the server process because we said, where's the magic, right? Mm-hmm. So the server process does not look that different. It has a similar endpoint configuration where you're telling NServiceBus, I would like to configure this endpoint, in this case, as a server.
As a server.
Right. So you're going to get used to this kind of API, and NServiceBus has a lot of these Fluent-style readable interfaces. And pretty much that's all it is saying to give you that reliable, robust behavior. The rest of it is pretty much just the business logic. It says, what do I do when a message arrives? And says, well, I handle messages of this type. Mm-hmm. And when that happens, well, I write a whole bunch of stuff out to the console, as we saw. Right. I'm going to create a response object. So I'm doing it explicitly, asking the bus to create a message for me, filling it with a bunch of information, setting a bunch of headers. So I don't want to drag that around. And finally telling the bus, okay, reply. And that's about it now in terms of code.
Yeah, now let's look at the messages and tell me what the restrictions are on the classes that I can create. Do they have to be serializable? Do we get to pick the formatter? Can we do our own serialization? What's the requirements around this?
So you're looking at the messages right now. All they need to do is implement the iMessage marker interface that lets NServiceBus know that these things are messages. As you can see, they don't need to be serializable by themselves. If you want to use binary serialization, it is possible. You just tell NServiceBus to use binary serialization rather than XML serialization. And then, obviously, you will need to have the serializable attribute on top of them because the binary serializer will choke otherwise.
Do you guys do your own serialization? That's what I'm getting at.
So we have pluggable serialization, which means that we wrap the binary serialization and the XML serialization. And if you want to write your own serializer, I know some people wrote a Google Protobuf serializer, and they plug that in. Somebody wrote a JSON serializer, and they plug that in. So just about anything you can think of in NServiceBus is pluggable, including the serialization.
The reason I say that is that I did some experiments with the speed of different serializers, and just doing your own binary serialization, we're taking every field and turning it into an array of bytes, is like 200 times faster than the binary formatter.
Oh, okay.
So it's really, you can really do a lot better than either of those formatters.
Right. So one of the things about the performance of NServiceBus in general, if we're kind of bringing up the performance topic, that when you're using queues, you tend to have an additional hop along the way because you have to, things need to be written to a queue and then read from a queue rather than communicated directly at a socket level, where you can get the highest level of performance.
Right.
So that's what gives you the reliability that we saw here, is that you can actually have processes, some of them up, some of them down, and communication continues to work in a reliable, robust way. The way that you get performance gains from using NServiceBus is by just having a whole lot more threads that are sending and processing messages in parallel. So rather than making each thread go as fast as possible, which you can do, like we said, you want to plug in your own serialization, you want to eke the maximum performance out of it, you can. But just by having more threads and more processes and more queues on more machines, you get this linear scalability where you say, if you try to max out a single machine, you can, but often then you're stuck. You've kind of optimized to death on a single machine. And if your load goes beyond that one machine, now you have to re-architect your whole system.
Obviously, if speed and scalability are your endpoint goal, you need to do both.
Well, yes, I'd say if low latency is your goal, I'd say that the vast majority of business systems are not going to be impacted by an extra millisecond or two of latency of this kind of stuff, where the biggest benefit that people start to see with NServiceBus is I just add another machine with more queues and it goes faster.
Yeah.
And in terms of rates, just to kind of give people a feeling of what's going on a single box, you can, where everything's transactional, reliable, queues, all that kind of thing, you can get to roughly 1,000 messages per second, which is, if you average that over a day, that's 86 million messages a day for a single box.
That's pretty
now,
good.
A lot of companies do not process 86 million messages of stuff per day in their system anyway.
True.
So I'd say, until you need to get to go there, don't fiddle around with it.
It's a good point. It's a good point that scalability is really more important than performance on any one particular thing.
On average in business processes.
太古の昔からのバグの恐ろしい大群が容赦なく私たちの NAT 忍者の兄弟を拷問し、容赦なく彼らの絶え間ないプログラミングの労働の果実を壊滅されています。私たちは反撃するための時間が来ている。多くのバグをできるだけ虐殺。あなたが誠 NAT 忍者であることを証明。いくつかのバグ退治のための準備はできていますか？あなたの剣を研ぐ取得し、で、あなたのミッションを完了してください。
So these are our messages. Sending them, handling them, we saw that bit over here. Now the one thing that I want to talk a little bit more about is, again, we're kind of still under the reliability thing.
Right.
What happens when, and developers often are concerned about this, so what happens if something bad happens? So let's say rather than doing this kind of console writing, we were talking to a database, and the database, as we all know, occasionally throws exceptions at us, saying, couldn't connect to the remote host because the connection pool was exhausted.
Right.
Or I got a deadlock. All sorts of bad things. So what we're going to do now is just to simulate this kind of stuff, we're going to throw an exception in our code over here, and that's it. Okay?
Okay.
So we're going to run this thing again.
I love it. Throw a new exception. No information whatsoever. Exception.
Well, I mean, it's there are the connection refused by the remote host. Often, an administrator is looking at that saying, "Really?
Yeah.
So what am I supposed to do about that?"
Right.
And so sometimes, even if there is that information, we're kind of wondering still, there was a deadlock. What do I do about it?
Right.
And cross your fingers and hope it doesn't happen again.
Right.
So we're going to send a message to the server.
Okay.
And this time we see, throw a new exception. Visual Studio's breaking on us. But now we're just going to press F5 and go through it.
Okay.
And it pops up again. And we're going to press F5 and it pops up again, and again, and again, and again. And all of a sudden it doesn't pop up anymore.
Because the retries were 5.
That's right.
Yeah.
So those are the retry mechanisms that we saw. One of the reasons that NServiceBus does this is because things like deadlocks, the database tells you very nicely, it's not you, it's me.
Right.
Please come back. Your data is wonderful. I want your data. I just can't handle it right now. And usually the developer says, oh no, it was an exception. This data must be garbage. Throw it away instantly. Write it to a log file somewhere where an administrator will look through it and say, oh,
of course they will.
Right. Well, this customer wanted to buy $10 million of products from us, but, we don't have that anymore because a deadlock happened. So for this reason, NServiceBus tends to be a little bit more forgiving, says, you know what, let's give it a couple of tries.
Right.
And even then, what we're going to see here, and we're going to talk about the error queue in just a second, is it's saying, this message has failed the maximum number of times. But now we're going to take a look at our error queue, which used to be empty. And now we're going to see that, there's actually a message in there. So even when a message fails the maximum number of times, NServiceBus does not say, this is garbage, I'm going to throw it away. Because there could be all sorts of other reasons that, somebody could be backing up the database right now. And this is still a good $10 million order. We don't want to lose it.
Right.
Let's just put it on hold somewhere until things work themselves out. And an administrator can monitor queues. One of the nice things about MSMQ is exposed via Windows Management Instrumentation, so you can very easily plug the number of messages in the error queue to your standard monitoring systems and put a little alert on there that administrators get a little ping telling them, oh, you got a message in the error queue, go take a look at what the problem is. And they can go in there and say, oh, okay, let's take a look at what it's telling me. So let's move this out a bit. And it's going to tell you a lot of things. It says, I had a problem processing a given message. It was done by this user, Quasimo Carl Franklin, and the queue that it came from is my server input queue on this machine. So go take a look at that process on that machine. That's where it failed. And this is the message ID that you need to look at. Okay. So imagine that your system is processing thousands of messages. By the time an administrator gets around to taking a look at what's going on, and a whole bunch of other stuff has happened, they can just kind of copy and paste this string, do a find in the log files, and say, oh, okay, the problem that we had was, let's go take a look at our process. We had some exception over here. It tells us right over here, failed raising this message, handling this message ID, which is exactly the same that we saw over there, right? Starts with 57C, ends with 119, and there it is. Starts with 5C7, and ends with 119. Finds exactly where the problem is. Says, oh, okay, it was a deadlock, or it was a whatever.
Right.
So there's nothing wrong with fix that problem. Now,
and you're the client and you have access to that error queue. You can easily just pull those up and throw them in
back in the regular queue that they came from. Now, a bunch of people use things like Queue Explorer to copy and paste the messages around. The thing is that if you copy and paste the messages around using regular low-level MSMQ, that the message ID changes. So actually copying a message from one queue to another is receiving a message and then sending the same message again. But anytime you send a message, MSMQ gives it a different ID. So actually that breaks your correlation. So the request response thing that we saw before, if you were just to copy the message over, it wouldn't work. That's why NServiceBus
That's why we need PubSub.
Well, no, that's not why you need PubSub. That's why NServiceBus comes with a set of tools for your administrator right here in the tools directory.
Okay.
Where one of them is called the Return to Source Queue tool. And this is what an administrator uses to say, after I fix the problem, so hold on just a second because we haven't fixed our problem. We're still throwing exceptions, right? So we don't want to do that. So we're going to get rid of the exception. Bug fixed, deadlock on, system is now back online. So here's our now fixed server. And we have our client that is running the same as before. And the administrator, after having solved these issues, says, great, we're going to tell the system to take the message from the error queue. And in this case, it says, if you want to return a specific message back, because we have a whole bunch of messages that failed, you want to try kind of one by one. Usually the behavior that an administrator does is, you know what, let's throw them all back in.
Right.
See what happens. If some of them end up back in the error queue,
that's okay.
We'll figure that out. We never lose data.
Right.
So it's a whole lot more, just go with it.
Right.
Rather than get all worked up about it. So in this case, we're going to send the messages back. I'm going to squish this off to the side so we can actually see the message end up in our server process and the client process handle it. There it is. And off it goes to the error queue. No, it's not please stand by. There it went back to the server process. We see that the server processed it successfully. We see that it's exactly the same message ID as before. And that our client is, once again, able to handle that response received thing.
Very cool.
It's my node and I like it. So that's the reliability that we're talking about in NServiceBus. And as you see, you didn't have to write any of this kind of code to have to make that happen.
Yeah,
it
that's
just
great.
solves that stuff so you can focus on your own business logic.
IJW technology.
Yeah.
It just works.
All right, so that's our request response story. As you saw, very simple and easy to get going.
Very simple.
And most important, it just works and it's reliable. And you don't have to figure out. So if you're trying to do this with WCF over MSMQ, just as a comparison, you need to remember that you need to specify that all of your operations on your server process are set to be transactional. You need to have the proper instancing mode. You need to set up in the config of the net MSMQ binding that the durable and only once behavior has to be true. If you don't remember to do all of this stuff, your system won't be reliable.
Yeah.
And a lot of people get burned. They think, I'm using MSMQ with WCF, everything should be handled, and all of a sudden it isn't.
Yeah.
And they get surprised, and the problem is you only find out when you're way off in production. The CEO is yelling at you because they're on the phone with their major client and the $10 million order is gone. And, this stuff isn't supposed to happen. And you're right, it's not supposed to happen. But then go figure out, what it is that you're supposed to do. So all that stuff is handled. It's in the box, but it's extensible, so you can play with it later if you need to do that.
Okay.
Next thing we're going to be talking about is publish subscribe.
Right.
We're going to skip over the unit test stuff. Lots of this, everything that you do in NServiceBus is testable, and it's there in the samples. But just to kind of keep moving on, we're going to open up our publish subscribe sample so we can see a little bit of the pub sub stuff, because that's very interesting. And as we mentioned before, very useful. So we're going to pull out pub sub over here. And here it looks similar in the sense that we have that same message project as before. We have a publisher process over here, and we have 2 subscriber processes. Okay?
Yep.
So, getting started, same as before, just going to open it up and F5 it. So, one of the things you get used to with NServiceBus, you tend to have more of these console windows laying around, and right now we're recording this on 1024 by 768, so you don't have a lot of screen real estate going on here. But here we've got the publisher on the top, 2 subscribers on the bottom. Okay. Once again, it's creating our queues for us, and all we're going to do here is we're just going to publish a whole bunch of messages, and we're going to see that both of our processes are receiving them. And everything's great. Same thing as before. If one of our subscribers crashes and starts up again, it's going to be exactly the same as the request response. All the messages will be waiting for them. All that's going to be great. The thing that might come as a little bit of a surprise to you, and this is in the documentation on the Getting Started page, is what happens when the publisher crashes. So what we're going to do is we're going to crash the publisher, and then we're going to restart it over here. And one of the things that you'd expect to happen is that, the publisher should remember who its subscribers were.
Right.
And as we're going to see over here is, oh my God, it doesn't.
Forsooth.
Right. Now, there's a reason for this, is that NServiceBus has infrastructure to make this robust. Okay, but that requires a little bit more storage, and we wanted to make NServiceBus for the developer that's just downloading it and using it as lightweight as possible. Okay. So you can turn on all the fault-tolerant stuff, and that's done with profiles, and this is why I'm talking about this thing over here. Okay. A lot of people get surprised about this, and it's in the documentation, so don't have to worry about that. That when we go back to our Visual Studio, that if we want to have everything be that level of reliability, what we need to do is we're going to go to this debug tab and tell NServiceBus that we actually want to run it in a different profile. NServiceBus comes with a bunch of profiles. The default, where everything's empty, is the light profile, which is most suitable for developers. When developers building a system, when they're writing business logic, they don't actually require fault tolerance on their own machine. So why bother with all this stuff that makes things slower and requires more infrastructure when you don't need it?
Yeah.
But when you do need it, for example, you're putting your system into your test lab and you want to have that kind of stuff, all you need to do is to tell NServiceBus via this command line, and we're going to talk about this command line in just a second, please use the integration profile.
Okay.
All right? So the integration profile is the set of NServiceBus internal knobs and dials that makes it ready for a test environment. So not yet scale-outable. That's a production environment.
All right.
But it gives you that level of fault tolerance. So that's the only thing that we're changing. We're going to run it again.
All right.
We're going to pull all our subscribers down to the bottom. And one of the things that you'll notice over here when looking at the log output is that each one of these subscribers, when starting up, actually sends a message to the publisher saying, hello, my name is subscriber to input queue at Quasimo, and I would like to subscribe to message type mymessages.iEvent.
Okay.
Now, the main difference when turning on the integration profile is, I'm going to store that information in durable storage so that later on, if I crash and wake up again, just like we did before, I'm going to remember that. Okay, we're working without a mouse here, folks. Right. So that's what, okay, there it is. Let's bring that puppy back to where it was. And we're going to start sending messages. And once again, we can see here is that our subscribers are receiving them.
Great.
So that's what I said before. It has all of this stuff in the box. Sometimes it takes a little bit of poking around to understand how you need to turn it on or off. The nice thing about profiles, and the reason that I bring it up, in addition to this cool pub/sub stuff, we're going to see the code in just a second. It's, as you'd expect, bus.publish. It's not rocket science to write this code.
Right.
The nice thing about this kind of profile stuff is that, for your own code, it's a really useful thing to have. Imagine you need to send email as a part of your system, and frankly, everybody needs to send email as a part of your system. When you're actually writing the system the first time, you don't want to have to fiddle around with setting up an SMTP client and to just run your system on your own laptop. You want to see, when your system is sending emails, you want to see them written out to the log files to say, am I sending the right kind of information? With NServiceBus, you can actually plug into the profiles and say, I would like to write a class that handles the light profile for my own email sender. So when I say to send an email, I'd like you to configure in the container my log file email sender rather than the SMTP email sender.
I see.
And when I'm moving this to my test lab, I would like to use this other kind of email sender. And when I'm in a production environment, I want to use the final real SMTP sender. So you can actually plug into all of these profiles and get this kind of life cycle friendly coding stuff going on without, as you saw, without actually have to change configuration.
What you really want to do is write those processes, the client and server processes or the pub/sub processes. What happens when you get the message? When do you send it? All of that stuff.
Right.
And then worry about the transport later.
So all this stuff is available in the documentation online. It'll tell you about running the sample and the fault-tolerant messaging and durable subscriptions, which is what we just talked about over here. One of the things I want to mention here is this start external program thing that we kind of skipped over a little bit because we're looking at Visual Studio and we're seeing all these processes come up. But one of the things that might surprise a lot of people is that every one of these things is actually a class library. It's a DLL. You don't actually have to write an executable to have this work, because
I wondered that when I saw this start, I was like, well, where's the startup project?
Right. Where are all the apps?
Where are the apps? Yeah.
So NServiceBus comes with its own host process because, quite frankly, it's fairly repetitive over and over again to write that kind of host process. So NServiceBus comes with its own. Now, the thing about the host process is that it has that same kind of lifecycle friendly behavior. So when you're running it over here, you just configure via the debug tab of your Visual Studio Project properties to start an external program and to use the reference to the NServiceBus host, which is that host exe process. Now, this exe process gives you that run it as a console application default, but the big thing is, well, nobody's going to actually go to production with a console application. Right. What I want a Windows service.
Right.
Now, the thing is that writing Windows services is a royal pain in the ass.
Well, writing them's easy. It's the debugging them.
It's the debugging them, which is exactly what we've been seeing here. Stop it, rerun it, set a breakpoint.
Yeah.
Back and forth, back and forth.
Yeah.
And,
no.
Yeah. You want to do that with Windows services? You're going to lose the last bit of hair that you have.
That's right.
And for those of you who know me, I have a lot of hair left, and this is why. It's genetic in our family. We do good in that area. So the thing about the host process is, as you see, it's very debug friendly. You can set breakpoints. We can, so in our publishing message, we can just say, all right, bus.publish, and let's put a breakpoint over there. As we saw, you just press F5. Everything pops up really quick, really lightweight. It doesn't feel like you're using Windows services at all, as well it shouldn't, and you get the regular breakpoints. You don't have to do anything fancy.
Right.
But the bigger thing going on here is so how do I install this thing as a Windows service?
Right.
So I'm not going to garbage up your laptop with a whole bunch of Windows services because
I wouldn't mind.
Okay.
No, I don't mind.
But
I know how to remove a service.
Right. But just to kind of give you and the folks listening an idea of the documentation that comes with NServiceBus, that any of your questions, you just go to the documentation and you'll see about this host process right over here where it tells about hosting. And if you want to host in your own process or you want to use the NServiceBus host, I'm just going to click over there. It tells you all about it, this start external program and where you get it from and how you configure it, the file scanning stuff that it does, how you configure the logging. So even the logging of NServiceBus is extensible. How to do your own dependency injection. All this stuff is documented online.
Great.
The thing I want to talk about is the thing that we're seeing over here on the bottom is the installation. Is that it has this very nice /install thing to it.
Jeez.
So installing it as a Windows service and specifying what the service name is and the display name and the description and how many instances you have. Do you want this thing to be started manually or not? What's the credentials, the username and password that you want this running under? I mean, developers shouldn't have to fiddle around with this crap, right. And definitely not administrators. They don't need this whole headache of how do I deal with all this kind of stuff.
You only have to install NServiceBus host exe as a service once, right?
Well,
and
you're
then
doing
it's
this,
a host container for all of your services?
No, in this case, you're doing this on a process-by-process level.
Process-by-process.
Because if you're doing publish-subscribe, you want the publisher to be loosely coupled at runtime from the subscribers. You don't want the fact that a subscriber is going to come down, it's going to bring down your publisher, or the client server case that we saw before.
Okay.
And we say, well, you want to continue accepting orders while this other guy is down. So that's why we make it really dirt simple to get up and running, both at a developer shop and actually to roll it out in production. And give a lot of people hear from their administrators, oh, it's MSMQ, it's going to be difficult to work with. Oh, we don't like using Windows services. Why just can't we throw everything in the same IIS? Because in a lot of cases, a little bit of tooling is missing. Once you put that tooling there, people say, you know what, I really like this.
Yeah.
It makes my life easier. And you know what? It's fairly easy when you get used to it. And you can see this in Visual Studio, obviously, in the Server Explorer. Just refresh our private queues to have this nice picture of everything that's going on in your system. But let's not talk about the Visual Studio picture, but the admin picture.
Okay. And
So
then
that-
I got a couple of questions too.
Right. So in the admin picture, administrators obviously are not going to be using Visual Studio to take a look at what's going on. They can just go in via the computer management, go into the services and applications, see over here the message queuing stuff going on, and what you're seeing over here is this dashboard that not only tells you what the queues are in your system, you can actually see the number of messages in every single queue.
Nice.
So imagine being able, for an administrator, for anybody in your system, to, via very simple built-in Windows
Right.
UI, say, what's the status of my system?
Yeah.
Which process is slowest? Which one has the most messages in it? Which one do I need to scale out? So you get all this. It really is useful once you start delving into this style of working. Say, wow, it really is powerful. Because in IIS, you kind of go in and you look at all the performance counters, memory in this heap and the process utilization. But you never really know, wait a minute, how many orders are actually pending in my system? Which
Right.
is a very useful metric to have. And it just pops it up right there for you.
Okay, a couple of questions. Is it possible to use both the pub sub and the request response in the same system? In other words, what if I had one client that wants to send a message up to the service bus, and the service bus then takes that with a publisher and sends it out to my thousands of subscribers all over the place?
So absolutely, there's we isolate these samples so that you can see each one by itself. But going back to our request response sample, in our server process over here, in our message handler, there's nothing that says
I can't have a client there
that you could just do over here.
Yeah.
Let's go over here and just add a bus.publish some other type of message.
Right.
And to have some other subscriber that's handling that and sending emails out, and some other thing that's creating an EDI type of document and sending that over to one of our partners. All this stuff can be in the same place. And as you said, it's almost everything you do in NServiceBus is just about a line of code.
Yeah, pretty much.
So I think that's the thing that throws a lot of people off. They're thinking it's going to be service bus.
Right,
it's this
right.
big heavyweight architecture. You have to write lots of code and lots of configuration.
That's the whole idea, is that you don't.
And you and they say, so it's just one line of code.
Yeah.
And it's such they're expecting it to be so hard that they do all sorts of big crazy things. No. You just add one line of code.
That's
Don't complicate yourself. That's kind of why we created NServiceBus the way it is. Because a lot of, you look at, IBM WebSphere or even from Microsoft BizTalk, these tend to be big, heavyweight type of tools that really require, everything that you do is a lot of effort.
Now, NServiceBus this is the community edition that we're using. So there is a professional edition as well.
Right. So there's
And what's the diff?
The difference is that, so we talked about throughput before. So the community edition is running single-threaded, which rather than doing 1,000 messages per second, you can expect it to do roughly 30 messages per second.
Okay.
So if you multiply that out throughout the day, you're probably talking about in the area of 2 million messages a day, 2.5 million messages a day, which, for a lot of people, that's still a lot.
Yeah.
So you get that for free. Off you go. If you need to do less than 2 million messages a day, go use that community edition.
Right.
It has all the robustness, all the things that we've been seeing over here.
So
pub
it's really
sub works.
just about the number of threads.
It's just about the number of threads, just about the throughput.
Okay.
You need more than that. I think it's a fair exchange of value that, if you're going to be running NServiceBus on hundreds of servers, maybe you should contribute back to the people that worked for the past 7 years in making this happen. Because we got lots of new great stuff in the next version coming out.
And so what's the price range?
So the price range for sort of the next step that you want to have lots of web servers talking to an application server, you really only need to pay for the application server, where you're going to need this kind of multi-threading stuff happening. So it's $500 per core for a perpetual license. Nice. You're talking about a quad-core application server, paying $2,000 for that. You could have
It's really not that much.
20 web servers in front of it.
Yeah.
This whole setup doing, hundreds of millions of messages per day.
Yeah.
And you're paying $2,000, which is less than you're paying for all of your Windows licenses, your SQL Server licenses, your hardware licenses.
That's really nothing.
It's a drop in the bucket.
Yeah.
So our goal here in setting the pricing was to get this, that minimal exchange of value that we can continue providing this and support. Is kind of a big thing that you can go to the discussion group and you'll get your questions answered. You can go online, you can have good documentation to get things going.
You're a good salesman, Rudy, but you don't need to be. I mean, it sells itself. It's wonderful.
Right. So that's what we're talking about.
This is great. And the website again?
The website again is right over here, NServiceBus.com. And when you get started, you just, it's the big green button right there. It says download V2.5 now. And, lots of big companies are out there using it.
I see.
Reuters. Conduit is one of my big clients. Conduit has over 250 million users that they're putting through NServiceBus. You can look at other customers that are using this as well.
Oh, that's great.
We've got Rackspace Hosting that's using this as well. We've got ISVs that are doing healthcare. We've got online software as a service guys. We got banking guys. We got utilities. Practically everybody all over the world is already using this. It's been around, like I said, a good number of years.
This is fantastic, Rudy. Thank you very much for showing it to us and showing us how it works.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Carl.
All right, and we'll see you next time on DNR TV.